Hi everybody, and welcome to week 2. You survived week 1, I hope, relatively unscathed. Hopefully you got all the tasks done that need to be completed in the first week, but there's 2 that absolutely have to happen. One is you have to have signed up for content, logged into content, and, not Connect, that's what I meant to say. And that's where you're going to find the web text and the assignments that you're going to start working on this week. And you'll need to start reading the web text. That's one thing. The other thing is, hopefully you took test number 1. Test number 1 is a pretty simple test. No studying or anything like that, just a simple test. It's mainly to make sure that you can get into the tests and sign up for HonorLock, the online proctoring service. Make sure you get that all squared away. You will have to do that before you take test number 2, which is our first test that really counts for points. But it's coming up pretty quickly, so you have to have completed test 1 and signed up for HonorLock to take test number 2. So make sure you get that done as well. This week we're going to cover a whole unit out of the textbook, which is several chapters. We're going to talk. You're going to have read, hopefully last week you read chapters 1 and 2. Chapter 1, just to explain, is sort of an introduction to the class, introduction to finance. There was no homework on it, but there is some of those ideas and concepts might be on the test, so don't just blow it off. And hopefully you've read the chapter number 2 as well. In any case, you want to have read chapters 1 through 3 by Monday night, and because you need to have completed the homework assignment questions for chapters 2 and 3 by 11:59 on Monday night. So that's really important that you get that done. You can get at that through either within Connect. When you first go to the Connect, it tells you what assignments are coming up due. It's also listed under McGraw-Hill assignments in the D12 section. There's a link to it there. Okay, so jump in on that and we'll get it going. And that's by 11:59 on Monday. Now by 11:59 on Wednesday, you want to have read chapter 4 and done that assignment, and then by Friday the 29th by 11:59 p.m. you want to have read chapter 5 and done that assignment. So it's a lot to cover in a week, but I'm sure you can do it. You'll be fine. Think of it as the foundation for what we're going to do in the future. Now I've logged into the web text here, so you can see this section of the text is covering financial analysis and planning, starting with chapter 2. Chapter 2, if you've taken an accounting class, will look like old hat to you. You'll think like that's not that big of a deal, but make sure you've gone through it. If you've never taken accounting, you really need to become familiar with the 3 basic accounting statements, that being an income statement, the balance sheet, and the statement of cash flows. All those are very important sources of information for us to be able to do the financial analysis and some of the core financial decision making that we're going to cover in the rest of the class. So let's take your time, go through it, make sure you understand it. This isn't an accounting class. You're not going to be an expert on accounting after reading one chapter in here. It just gives you a brief overview. Okay. Chapter 3, I'm going to go ahead and open that one up so you can see. Chapter 3 starts to cover financial analysis, which is an important function of finance. And one of the, and this largely revolves around ratios. Ratios are very important. Ratio analysis is a very important activity that not only a company needs to do, but investors almost will certainly do it as well. So ratio analysis is really important to understand. Ratios are covered in basically, they fall under one of these categories, which is really helpful so you understand exactly what they're for. Profitability ratios, asset utilization ratios, liquidity ratios, and debt utilization ratios are the overall categories. There's lots of ratios that are used in financial analysis. These are some of the core basic ones, but they give you an idea of what's going on. So they fall under one of those categories. And again, what it's important is to look at the relative, you're analyzing the ratios of firms within relevant categories, so like competitors and things like that, or different kinds of firms within a particular industry. So ratios are a pretty big deal, and you want to learn as much about those as possible. You're also going to look at, going back to the major overall objectives, you're going to learn about the DuPont system of analysis, which basically looks at the sources of return on assets and return to shareholders. Again, something that is looked at closely internally, but also looked at externally outside of the organization. We're going to talk about trend analysis and what's involved with that, and we're going to understand that there's influences on income that really you need to kind of take a good look at before you just accept what somebody says their reported income is. There's lots of different factors that come into play, more than you might guess. Okay, so that's chapter 3. Going ahead to chapter 4 then. We get into the idea of financial forecasting, and not surprisingly, finance is the backbone of most firms or organizations' planning process, because it revolves largely around numbers, and the financial people are the ones that produce the numbers and for others to look at. So it's sort of the backbone behind it. So we're going to look at how financial forecasting is essential to the strategic growth of the firm. We're going to look at a variation on the 3 financial statements that you looked at in Chapter 2 and how they're used in the forecasting process. Percent of sales method is, I can tell you lots of organizations use that. That's a very common thing to do because it's relatively easy to do and it's not that inaccurate. So, lots of firms use that. So pay close attention to that. We're going to look at other methods of forecasting to help determine, with the real outcome of it being is, okay, if we do these things, how are we going to pay for it? Essentially what it comes down to. So we need to understand exactly what kind of funds are required to pull off the plan that as it's put together. We're going to understand that the process of forecasting forces a firm to consider seasonal and other effects on cash flow. So we're going to learn cash flow is a very, very important part of financial analysis. Okay, so the last concept we're going to look at starts getting into a more core financial idea, and that is leverage. You understand what leverage is. It's broken down into 2 different types. One's operating leverage, another one's called financial leverage. They're very different things, but they essentially are, you looked at in combination is what ultimately how people look at that. And so you're going to take a good look at that in terms of what's involved with leverage, and also understand that leverage does increase the firm's ability to make money, but it also increases its risk of failure. Back in the 80s, primarily into the 90s, leverage was used quite frequently to help finance the acquisition of a company. And that led to several companies performing very poorly and ultimately going out of business. So look at that pretty closely and understand what's involved with it, the risks that are involved with it, and but also understand why it's appealing. So that'll get us through Chapter 5, and then next week we will start talking about some of the more core concepts of finance. But it's a good start. So, in going through it, if you have any questions, especially as you do the homework, by the way, when you do the homework, you get a very good explanation of the answers after the due date is passed. That's why it's really important that everybody stay on the due dates for the homework and get homework done on time, because I really can't extend it because the answers are out there. Okay, so your answer, so you can look at those things, and it does a very nice job of giving you an explanation of what's involved with what it would have been to do the assignment correctly and help you understand what potentially that you did wrong if you got it wrong. That's one thing. The other thing if you go through that and you still feel like you don't really understand something very well, what I would suggest is we would meet in the virtual office space that I have. It's listed under in our D2L shell, and actually set up a time that we go through it kind of face-to-face and digitally, but face-to-face nonetheless. And the reason for that is really simple. It's really hard to ask a question in email, for example, if you really don't understand what you don't know.
And that's typically the case if something's confusing to you. So don't hesitate to do that, okay? And so send me an email in D2L, please, not in the Oakton email system. I get buried in that thing, and I just hate it when I miss students' emails to me, but it does occasionally happen. In D2L, I know it's coming from a student, so that's why it's a good thing for us to communicate through D2L's email. I'll set up a time in there and confirm it, one of those 3 times you give me, and we'll go through it. I also have office hours, or what I call office assistance hours, because that's really what I'm there for when I do that. They're at a set time between 10 and 11 on Mondays, but this is a 8-week class. It's got a lot of things crammed into it. Sometimes you simply can't wait. So send me an email with 3 times we can meet, and that'll suffice as well. We will come up with a good time for us to go through and understand what you're struggling with, okay? All right, that should do it. It's a lot to do for a week, but it's a good foundation for the rest of the class, so take your time, go through it. If you have any questions, reach out, and I wish you the very best of luck.